We are starting a new teaching series today called Mind Shift. And I've been excited about this series because I've been thinking about it, preparing for it for honestly months now. And it's something I'm really passionate about, what we're going to be talking about over the next few weeks together. And you might be wondering, what is this series, Mind Shift, actually all about? And if I could sum it up, I would sum up this series, Mind Shift, in this way. Mind Shift is all about destroying those internal limitations that are keeping you from living the fully alive life that you were created to live. We're going to not just destroy, we're going to pulverize. We're going to throw a grenade in those internal limitations, and we're going to blow them to smithereens. Because I believe with everything that's in me, and you may not believe me when I first say this, but I believe with everything that's in me that's true, that the greatest things limiting your life are not the external realities around you. It's not your job. It's not family, it's not relationships, it's not the world we live in. The external realities, not diminishing the realities you might be facing, but I do not believe that those are the greatest limiters on your life, but rather, the greatest things limiting your life are the internal realities. It's your mindset. It's how you're approaching each and every day. See, I think if you're going to win the war in your life, you got to begin to fight the battle in your mind. And for some of us, you're fighting some pretty intense battles. Maybe you've been doing so for a long time. And this series is an invitation to begin to explore what it looks like to begin to shift your mind, to begin to think differently. Because I believe that if you're going to live differently, it doesn't start by changing the world around you. It starts by experiencing a shift in the world within you. And so each and every week, we're going to be looking at different mindsets that we can begin to shift. So if you're here and you're like, man, I feel stuck in my life. I feel unhealthy. I feel frustrated. I feel like I'm in a funk. I've been in this season, and I don't know when I'm going to get out of this season. I want to implore you to make it a priority to be at this series. Because this series, I think, is going to begin to bring a lot of internal freedom, which I think will also lead to a transformation in your life. This is not a series about motivating you, because motivation is like a sprinter, right? It moves fast, but it doesn't last very long. We need more than motivation to step into the life that God has created you to live. And we all know motivation's not enough, because in just a few months, it'll be January, and everyone's going to be motivated on January 1, right? The gym will be packed, but then by the end of January, that gym will most likely be almost back to normal. Because motivation moves fast, but it doesn't last very long. See, what we need is a shift in our mindset, because our mindset is a marathon runner, and your life will never exceed the mindset from which you are living from. And all of you are living from a mindset. Some of these mindsets were imprinted on you when you were only a child. So much so that you don't even know you're living with that structure internally. And then others of you, you've gone through some things. You've experienced some things that have begun to create a mindset in you that has actually begun to limit your life. You see, your mindset, in so many ways, is your ceiling. Like, you are your own ceiling in your life. And I know hearing that, for some of us, that might sound like an oversimplification. But don't be fooled by the simplicity of the statement. Changing your mindset will be one of the hardest things you will do with your life. It's simple to understand. Your mindset is your ceiling. Easy, got it. But what's hard is beginning to change your mindset. What's hard is accepting that you are your own ceiling, because you can no longer blame the external realities around you. Now you have to take ownership for yourself and responsibility for your responses to whatever life throws your way. And I believe that some of you, you are one mind shift away from an entirely different life. Now, some of you might be hearing this, and you're like, Travis, I think I heard a TED Talk on this. This sounds like some millennial Gen Z woo-woo TikTok stuff. Sounds like you're telling me to manifest my future, Like, is this even in the Bible? I have some really good news for you. This is actually biblically grounded, and I found it in Proverbs 23, verse 7. This little verse tucked away, written by what the Bible says is the wisest person who have ever lived. Proverbs verse 23 says this: for as he thinks in his heart, so is he. Can we just say that verse out loud, just so I know you're hearing it? Let's say it out loud. For as he thinks in his heart, so is he. One more time. For as he thinks in his heart, so is he. So before TikTok and TED Talks and manifesting. Solomon was telling us what you think, the interior world you create, will become the external reality you live in. The thoughts you nurture the most will become the life you create. Have you ever wondered to yourself, how did I get here? Not like here to this building. I hope you know how you got here. But like, how did I get here in life? How did I get here? How did my marriage get in this place? How did I get here in my job? How did I get here in my emotions? How did I get here in my relationships? How did I become the way that I am? Have you ever wondered? How did I get here? Solomon, he's actually telling you. He's giving you the roadmap. He's saying, for as a man thinks, or as a woman thinks, he or she is. Meaning this, the quality of your thoughts is the best predictor of the future quality of your life. So if you want to upgrade the quality of your life, Solomon, the wisest man to have ever lived, would say you will need to upgrade the quality of your thoughts. And it's not just Solomon who says this, Paul. He actually says this in Romans chapter 12, verse 2. Paul, a disciple of Jesus, he would go on to write almost 75% of the Christian scriptures, the New Testament. He wrote this in Romans 12, verse 2. He says, don't copy the behaviors and customs of this world, but let God transform you into a new person. And let's say the next part out loud together. By changing the way you think. How does God transform you into a new person? Paul says he does it by changing the way you think. Then what? When you change the way that you think, you will learn to know God's will for you. I wonder if anybody here, you're like, what's God's plan for my life? What's God's will for my life? And some of you, you're asking for the wrong thing. You're asking for God to give you a new map. And God's like, no, first I need to give you a new mindset. Because your old mind isn't ready for the thing I'm about to do. That if you're going to step into the things that I want to do in your life and through your life, you're going to need a new mindset because the old one won't do. The old one will limit you. I heard one pastor recently say that some people are structured for failure. And that line just sort of hit me hard. That some of us have this internal structure that can only produce what it was created to produce, failure. What that means is that some of us, we have structures that can only create bitterness, that can only create fear, that can only create anxiety. And therefore, we shouldn't be surprised that if that is the byproduct of our lives. But if that's the bad news, that some people are structured for failure, here's the good news. You can be structured for success. You can be structured for success. The mindset and the internal structure from which you build your life can be built for success. Paul, he agrees with Solomon, for as a man or woman thinks as he is, he is. That is who they become. I love what Elder Thaddeus, he said this. He says, our life depends on the kinds of thoughts that we nurture. And by the way, you're nurturing thoughts. There's no thought you don't nurture. You decide whether a thought stays or whether it goes, whether I embrace it or whether I leave it, whether I nurture it and feed it or whether I starve it. And he says, our lives depend on the kinds of thoughts we nurture. If our thoughts are peaceful, calm, meek, and kind, then that is what our life is like. If our attention is turned to the circumstances in which we live, we are drawn into a whirlpool of thoughts and can have neither peace nor tranquility. Have you ever felt like you've been drawn into the whirlpool a little bit? Have you ever felt that way in your life? You just feel like you're out of control, not sure where it's going to end, no peace, no tranquility, no calm. See, what Elder Thaddeus says and what Solomon and Paul would agree with is that the life you create is the byproduct of the thoughts that you nurture the most. And so this series is all about how do we begin to nurture healthy mindsets. Simple, but not easy. How do we do the hard work of letting God transform and change the way that we think so that we can step into the fully alive life that God has created you for? And here's the first mind shift. If you're taking notes today, I want you just to write this down. Changing my life starts with changing my mind. Changing my life starts with changing my mind. Simple, not easy. It doesn't start with you changing your job. It doesn't start with changing the income bracket that you're in. It doesn't come with changing your spouse or changing your friends. Those might affect your life, but in the long run, what you produce from your life will always come from the root of your deepest held beliefs. So if you want to change your life, it starts with changing your mind, changing the structures that you're building your life from. Because have you ever met a person who's really, really just negative and yet lives a very happy life? I've not met that person. They're like, man, you're so happy, so much joy. What's your secret? And they're like, I'm just negative about everything. I'm just the glass half empty all the time. And it just brightens up my morning every time I start with that. I've never met a person who's apathetic, that lives a life of hope and purpose. I've never met a person that's cynical, that lives a life of hope. And this is hard to hear, but you need to understand, you choose what you believe. And so what you choose to believe, what you choose to think, what thoughts you nurture will always take your life somewhere. Behind a negative life, I guarantee, is a broken mindset. And so how do we talk about this? How do we begin to change our life by changing our mind? And maybe you're here, and one thing I love about this church is that we are not a church full of church people. We have a lot of people here in this church that don't even believe in what I believe or believe in what others of you here believe. They are skeptical of maybe the church. They're cool with Jesus, but skeptical of the church maybe, right? Or they're not sure what they believe about God. And so there may be some of you here today where me using these scriptures to talk about your mindset might not be enough for you. But I want to tell you that everything I'm talking about is not only grounded in the scriptures. You might be relieved to know, and you probably already know, it's grounded in science. That the very things I'm talking about today are grounded in science. And over the last few decades, finally, the science community has caught up with Scripture. And the science community, over the last 30-plus years, has discovered something. See, they used to believe that the brain was static or fixed. It was sort of this machine in your head that would at some point just stop evolving, stop growing, and wouldn't go any further. And if anything happened, then you were just kind of sorry, out of luck. Your brain is your brain. It will never get any better than what it currently is. And aren't you glad that we've learned that's not entirely true? Through something called neuroplasticity, a human brain, the science community has learned, has the ability to change throughout life. The human brain has this unique ability in a lot of ways to renew itself. And it does this through what is called neurogenesis. Through neurogenesis, what we've learned is that every single day, your brain essentially has these like baby nerve endings that you wake up to, and they're just waiting for you to feed your brain with something. Have you ever noticed that when you wake up and you spill your coffee on your white t-shirt, the whole day's ruined? Right? But if you wake up and everything's going well, you wake up early and you're refreshed, you're not tired, you didn't burn the toast, you made it to work early, like everything else in the rest of your day seems to go well, right? Because in the beginning of your day, through neurogenesis, every day your brain is waiting to receive whatever it is you're going to give it. There's something about reclaiming the morning that just has an ability to set the tone for your day, doesn't it? You see, neurogenesis is one of the main reasons behind this. See, if we're going to understand the importance of shifting our mind, I think this is so incredibly important. You have to realize that your thoughts are real things doing real things to you. That your thoughts are not just these little ethereal things coming in and out of your life and have no real effect on your life. No. If you're going to understand why we got to shift our mind, then you've got to understand your thoughts are real things in you doing real things to you. In fact, every thought that you have, even as you're listening to this message, there's electrochemical responses taking place in your brain as you listen to this that are producing a response of physiological changes in your body. And that's just a fancy pants way of saying you feel what you think about. And you know that, right? If your boss emails you on Sunday night and says, hey, we need to meet first thing tomorrow morning, you feel it. I heard the oof. I hear that oof, right? Like, especially in today's world, you're like, I'm getting laid off tomorrow. Now you're not sleeping. Now you're anxious. Now that's all you can think about. And it creates a response in your body. But also think about the good things that you feel. If I told Jenna today, we're going to Disneyland tomorrow, Jenna's going to be like, and she's gonna feel happy, and she's gonna feel excited, and she's gonna have a physiological response. She would probably cheer right now. That's not happening, I'm sorry. But your thoughts are doing real things in you. In fact, on a very literal biological level, what we've discovered is that every thought you think is impacting the 75 to 100 trillion cells in your body. Studies have actually shown that your DNA changes its shape based on the thoughts that you're thinking. So when you think negative, toxic, cynical, hopeless, angry, bitter thoughts, we've actually have studies that show your DNA shrinks. That feeling you feel when you're stressed, where it feels like your body's kind of like getting smaller and you're folding in on itself, science has shown that it's because your DNA is doing exactly that. And yet, the opposite is true, that when you fill your mind with happy thoughts, optimistic thoughts, joyful thoughts, you practice gratitude. Isn't it amazing? People are like, gratitude, it's good, Like, the Bible's been talking about that a long time. But what science confirms is that when we fill our thoughts, our minds with this, your DNA doesn't shrink, it actually expands. Have you noticed when you're in a really good mood, you just walk a little different? Head's a little higher, chest is out a little bit more. You can breathe. When you're stressed, you struggle to breathe. Yeah, it's because these thoughts are doing real things to you, which means the quality of the thoughts you nurture will always lead to the quality of life you live. Peace Pilgrim said this: if you realized how powerful your thoughts are, you would never think a negative thought. If we actually thought about what this is doing to me, and we live in the land of everyone's trying to eat healthy here, gluten-free, vegetarian, all the things. Like, we care about what we're eating. Arizona, everyone's like, whatever, where I'm from. But here, people seem to really care about what they're putting in their body. Like, was the cow of this hamburger happy before it died? Like we really care. And what's interesting, though, is we can be so thoughtful about the food we put in our body because we understand it's doing something to us, and yet we don't give our thoughts a second thought. When we put our thoughts in us, they're doing something to us. And by the way, there is a difference between thinking and thinking about. I think the distinction is really important. You can't help thinking. So when people are like, think before you act, this is what my mom always said to me. It's like, you can't not think before you act. You are a thinking being. Every action is a byproduct of a thought first, right? So you're always thinking, but there's a difference between thinking and thinking about. There's a difference between a thought showing up, and you're going like, oh, I see that thought, and you saying, oh, come on in, make yourself at home, hang out on the couch, let's talk for a while, let's mingle, let's hang out a little bit. That's what thinking about actually looks like. You can't change thinking, but you're always in control of what you think about. And what you think about, according to Peace Pilgrim and Elder Thaddeus and Paul and Solomon and tons of scientific study and research, what they all agree on is that you are what you think. You ever heard the phrase, you are what you eat? If that's the case, I'm a box of tacos from Taco Bell. But you are what you think. I wonder if we were to actually see what you think about the most, what it would say about who you are. Would we be surprised? See, the thoughts you think are the basis from which you build your life. So I want to give you some mind shift truths here. So 3 things that I believe that if you're going to begin to shift your mind, we actually got to begin to understand and embrace these truths for our lives. And the first is this. If you're taking notes, I want you to write this down. You are not a victim of your biology. Mind shift number 1. You're not a victim of your biology. Now, let me be just abundantly clear, because we are pro-therapy, pro-counseling, pro-modern-day medicine. Like, we encourage people to get therapy. I go to therapy. Many of us in the church, I know, go to therapy. So we're not saying, hey, just pray the anxiety away. That's not how it works. Can I get an amen on that? We all get that. We're not that church, right? So if you are prescribed antidepressants, this is by no means saying don't do it. But what I am saying is your predisposition does not have to be your destiny. What I am saying is that if you deal with fear, insecurity, anxiety, depression, that doesn't have to be the final word on your story. That you can rise above it. I've seen it. You have seen it. People can rise above, no matter what their biology might have told them, they can rise above it. You are not a victim of your biology. And this is one of the hardest things to accept. This is really hard to accept because you cannot control the things that happen to you or how you were born or the family you were born into. You can't control any of that. But here's why it's hard. While it's not your responsibility, those things you experienced, your response is always your responsibility. Your experiences weren't your choice, but your response to your experiences are always your responsibility. You can rise above what it is that you've experienced, what it is that maybe you are even experiencing in this very moment. And again, you may be thinking, Travis, you're oversimplifying it. I actually don't think I am. I think I'm being really clear. The idea is simple. The work is hard. And anyone who's done therapy, you know it's hard. You know it's hard. You got to keep showing up. You got to keep showing up. You got to keep rising above. Because my experiences weren't my choice. But my response to those experiences are always my responsibility. Here's the first mind shift truth, that you are not a victim of your biology. The second is this: you are the landlord of your mind. You're the landlord of your mind. And no one's going to manage your mind for you. No one's coming to manage your mind for you. You've got to manage your mind for yourself. And you are the landlord of your mind. And what Scripture has said and science has confirmed is that one of the most spiritually profound things you do every day, you do and you don't even know you do it. And that is you choose. Every single day, one of the most spiritually significant things you will do is you will choose. You will choose what you think about. You will choose what you ruminate on. You will choose what you allow into the room of your mind and what you will not allow into your mind. Every day we're choosing what it is that we are going to focus on. And see, you need to understand that you don't necessarily have to think about everything you feel, but you will always feel everything you think about. You don't have to think about everything you feel, and it's not saying, hey, ignore it, pretend it's not there. No. You acknowledge its presence in your life. But you will always feel everything you choose to ruminate on and what you choose to marinate on. You're the landlord of your mind. You can evict any and every thought that no longer should have real estate in your mind. I've been reading this story. I don't know if you guys saw it, in Airbnb in Los Angeles. It just happened the last couple weeks. So in Airbnb in Los Angeles, the owner rented her guest house to somebody that did it through Airbnb. And that person was supposed to leave on April of 2022. It's October 2023, and that person is still living in this person's guest house rent-free. You know what's even crazier is that because of some permitting issues on their guest house, the owner cannot legally kick this person out of their guest house and can't even begin charging them. And the owner of this house has dubbed this tenant, as you would probably call them, the tenant from hell. This person is just living rent-free. I wonder what's living rent-free in your mind. I wonder what you've allowed to take up residence in your mind. And I'm telling you today, it's not some permitting issue that's keeping you from evicting that thought. It is you. You are allowing this thought, this posture, this mindset to take up a room in your mind rent-free. I wonder what tenants from hell you got swirling around in your head right now. That it's time to be evicted. It's time to do what San Francisco landlords have done to all of us and price them out, all right? If you're a San Francisco landlord, we love you, but lower your rent. But seriously, your future is too valuable. Your life is too valuable. Your purpose is too valuable. You are too valuable to allow this thought to rent real estate in your mind any longer. Your future is too valuable to allow it to be given away. And by the way, it's not taken. You're giving it away to something that is beneath who you are called to be. You are the landlord of your mind. Turn to the person next to you and say, you're the landlord. You're the landlord. You're the landlord. You're the landlord. Second, third, and final truth is this. Mind shift truth is this. That you are wired for love. You're wired for love. You're not a victim of your biology. You are the landlord of your mind. And third, and this will change your life if you actually believe it enough to activate it in your life, that you are wired for love. 2 Timothy chapter 1, verse 7 says this, "For God has not given us a spirit of fear, but of power and of love and of a sound mind." God's not giving you the spirit of fear. God's not giving you anything but love. He's called you to live a life of power, of love, and a sound mind. You are wired for love. Your default is love. You're not wired for fear. You're not wired for anger. You're not wired. Some people are like, I'm just cynical. I'm a real. No, you're wired for love. You're not wired for bitterness. You're not wired for apathy. You're not wired for insecurity. You are wired for love. And so if you need a simple filter of, should I let this thought in or not? Let me ask you, is it compatible with love? Does it help you love God? Does it cause you to love yourself? Does it cause you to love others? Does it cause you to love the world? And if it's ever a no or a maybe, bye. like we're not letting it in. Because you are wired for love, and anything that is not compatible with love is beneath who you were created to be. It's beneath who you were created to be. Because you were created for love. And living a life knowing that your default is love may be the difference between unlocking a life you love or continued to being locked in a life you loathe. I feel like I just need to say someone in here, you hear that and you have a visceral reaction to this idea that you're created for love because at some point someone convinced you that you're not worthy of love. This isn't in my notes. I just feel like somebody in this place, God wants you to know you are worthy of the love I'm talking about right now. I don't know what your parents said to you. I don't know what he or she did or said to you. I don't know what life has thrown at you. But I want you to know you are worthy of the love that I'm talking about right now. And if you don't believe it, let me believe it for you. You are worthy of love. So don't settle for a life that's beneath it. And for many of us, the beginnings of settling for a life that's beneath love starts as a thought that's beneath love. So what do we do about that? Psalm 42, David. I love David. Man, if you are empathetic and you feel a lot of things and a lot of emotions, then you need to read the Psalms because that's David. He's just a lot of emotions a lot of the time. Psalm 42, verse 5, he says this. He says, "Why are you down in the dumps, dear soul? Why are you crying the blues?" Who's David talking to? He's talking to himself. He's talking to himself. I don't know what happened to David. Have you ever woke up in the morning? You're like, what is going on today? Why do I feel this way? I've been there many times. Why do I feel this way? And notice what David does. He starts talking to himself. He's like, all right, David, we need to have a talk. David, what's going on, man? You're really down right now. We need to do something about this. And then David starts bringing his thoughts back to God's love. He doesn't go, well, just going to be one of those days, I guess. This is what David does. He says, I'll fix my eyes on God. Soon I'll be praising him again. He puts a smile on my face. He's my God. And by the way, there's no verse in here that says, and then David felt everything he just said. I have this sense that when David said this, he didn't feel any of it. That he was not there yet, that he was talking himself into a feeling, talking himself into a truth. I love this because it reminds me of what Martin Lloyd Banks wrote in his book on this very verse. He says this, have you realized that most of your unhappiness in life is due to the fact that you're listening to yourself more than talking to yourself? Whoo, let that line sink in. That so much of your unhappiness is you're listening to yourself instead of talking to yourself. Take those thoughts that come to you the moment you wake up in the morning, they start talking to you. They bring back the problems of yesterday. Now look at what David did. Instead of allowing this critic to talk to him, he starts talking to himself. Why are you down in the dumps, dear soul? He asks. His critic had been depressing him, crushing him, so he stands up and says, self, listen for a moment. I will speak to you now. Some of y'all need to do that tomorrow morning. Look in the mirror and be like, self, I'm talking to you this morning. Listen, because I got some things to say. Some of you are like, that's stupid. Try it out for a week. See how you're feeling. I guarantee you start talking to yourself. And by the way, this is not like, Scripture said this a long time ago. If you're ever done any sort of therapy, you know how powerful self-talk can be. And you know that it's a practice that's not only grounded in psychology, it's grounded in Scripture. That's what David does right here. He's like, self, nope, 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 nope. You don't get to tell me what's going down today. I'm telling you. And I know this might be confrontational to say, but I'm just going to say it. And you can disagree. It's fine. But I got a microphone, so I'll say it. Just because you feel something doesn't mean it's fact. Just because you had a thought about something doesn't mean it's true. You want to have a miserable life? Assume everything you feel is fact. You want to be a roller coaster? Assume every thought that shows up, oh, it must be true. No. Everything you feel is not fact. Everything you think is not true. And I know it's popular to say, well, perception is my reality. Sometimes it's not, though. Can we be honest? Sometimes that's what we say when we know our reality actually isn't true, our perception isn't true, and we don't know how to justify it. So then we're just like, well, my perception is my reality. It's like the trump card, right? Like, yeah, what do I say to that? But sometimes your perception isn't reality. Have you ever had a nightmare? And you woke up and you're shaking and you're sweating and your heart is racing? Because your brain doesn't know. It thought it was real, but was it real? Were clowns really chasing you last night, Jenna? No, it wasn't. Your perception wasn't reality. It was a thought, but it wasn't true. It was a feeling, but it wasn't fact. And so if you want to change the direction of your life, start by changing the declaration of your lips. Start by changing the things that you say. And by the way, this is something I've had to work on so much. So much to change the mindset that I have. But I have two questions that have helped me a lot when feelings show up and they feel like fact, and thoughts show up that feel like truth. These two questions help me vet these thoughts. Here's the first one. Is it really true? So you feel something, you think something. The first question I ask, is it really true? Is it really true? And sometimes I'm stubborn. I'm like, yes, it's true. You don't know what you're talking about. I feel it. I think it. So it must be. So then I go to the next question. Can you prove without a shadow of a doubt that this is true? Can you prove? Where's the evidence? Not subjective, not like, well, I thought maybe. No. Can you prove that this is actually true? I think my wife hates me. Is it true? Yes. Do you know for sure? Well, not really. She didn't send me an email saying, Travis, I hate you. I have no concrete fact. Do you know how many thoughts I've given a pass because of those two questions? Whereas before, any thought, I'd throw at a welcome party. Oh my gosh, it was a miserable way to live. But when I started saying, is it true? And then, do you have evidence to support that it's true? Sometimes I think we fall victim of uninterrogated thoughts. And just because a train of thought shows up into the station of your mind doesn't mean you have to get on that train. Because that train will always take you somewhere. And the question is this train of thought taking me closer to love, God, myself, others, the world? Or is this train of thought actually taking me further from those things? And if it's taking you further, just wave to the train as it passes. I see you. I acknowledge you. I'm not getting on that train. I'm going to wait for the train called love to show up. See, because you are wired for love. If the band wants to come up, we're going to wrap. So let me close with this verse from Paul in Philippians, chapter 4, verse 8. He says, and now, dear brothers and sisters, one final thing. He says, fix your thoughts on what is true. Do you notice that's not passive language? It's extremely active. He doesn't say, wait till the good thoughts come. He doesn't say, wait until tomorrow. He doesn't say, well, read a joke book. He says, fix your thoughts on what is true. Fix your thoughts. Focus your thoughts on what is true, on what is honorable, on what is right, on what is pure, what is lovely, what is admirable. Think about things that are excellent and worthy of praise. And then in verse 9, he says, keep putting into practice, which some of y'all need to hear that. You're not going to do this once and just have it. You got to keep putting it into practice. So Monday, you might nail it. Tuesday, feels like the train isn't leaving the station. Like you're being forced on a negative train of thought. You got to keep putting it into practice. Keep showing up. Keep doing the work. Keep putting into practice all you learned and received from me. Everything you heard from me and saw me doing. Then the God of peace will be with you. I don't even need to ask you to raise your hand. Who wants peace today? Like, all of us want peace. And you don't need to wait for a peaceful world or peaceful external reality to begin to experience an internal peace. Because while you cannot control the world around you, you always have control of the mind within you and the thoughts within you. And it will be the hardest work you will probably do with your life and in your personal growth. But I believe if you want to step into the fully alive life, chances are there's some structures, some mindsets that are going to keep you from stepping into it fully. And the question is, will you keep showing up? Will you do the work? Will you take back the mind that God has given you? I love it. You're the neuroplastician of your own mind. Every single day, you're the neuroplastician that gets to decide, what do I feed this thing? What do I think about? What do I think about? Because the quality of your thoughts determines the quality of your life. So if you want to change your life, it starts by changing your mind.